Thank you, Ellie. Good afternoon, everyone. So except for on television, I think the Mad Men era is over. You know, they made not only the liquid lunches, but the mass marketing that folks in that era enjoyed. And today, as marketers, we're all facing a world that looks really different. Consumers are more diverse. They consume media in new ways, oftentimes at once. Some people, I forget who earlier was talking about it. It's not only that I'm seeing your promotions on my computer, on television, on my tablet, on my smartphone, but often I'm seeing them all in more than one channel at once. I think the last number I saw was something like 62% of people are looking on either their tablet or their smartphone while they're watching television. There's more marketing options for us to choose. The last number I saw was the Boston Consulting Group said that there are 100 ways that 100 types of marketing that marketers could use, and 17 of those are on mobile phones alone. And then there are more ways to buy. Someone earlier was talking about you've got a retail store, you've got online, you can buy on your smartphone. It's a really challenging world for a marketer. And it's even more challenging because, as Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, pointed out, the CEOs, the CFOs are really saying, I want to know what you're doing with this. I want to see the return you're getting, the ROMI or the ROMO, another term that's thrown around. But people are really saying, you've got to get a return on these marketing dollars. The days where we feel really good about having allocated X% of the budget and see what we get, those days are really over. So marketers have a lot of questions, and they're all questions that have been asked in the past, but they're harder to answer today. What size budget do I need to achieve my goals? How do I best allocate that budget? How do I reach the segments that are most important to me? And on and on and on. And really what ThinkFind's in business to do, and what I want to talk to you about today is, how do we help you answer those questions at a high level so that you can set the marketing strategy that will make you most effective? So people are challenged, whether it's from the creative side or whether it's from the numbers side. The statistics are really pretty overwhelming. 65% of CMOs said that they really weren't prepared to deal with the data, and so they'll maybe turn to our friends at Datalicious and help them get answers from that. 54% said that they don't have the tools that they need. So whether it's a big data approach or whether it's the ability to have an application that tracks how people respond, marketers are struggling with that as well. More than half the people in a survey by Unica, which is a campaign management company now owned by IBM, they picked measurement and analysis and learning as and integrated cross-channel marketing as the number 1 and 2 challenges they face. And then finally, in the end, only 9% of marketers in the CMO Council said, we've got this all figured out. And so it's really a challenge, and there's no way around it. We really have to address this. So marketing's changing in a lot of ways. First of all, the planning's changing. It used to be we make the annual plan, we do the big upfront TV buy, and here we go into the year. But now the cadence moves more like the digital world and the mobile world, and marketers are seeing results, they're reacting to competitors, they're doing test and learn, and they're really planning over and over again throughout the year. Secondly, the way that marketing is done, the creative side, is moving from mass to engaged. And I couldn't have had a better setup for this one than the presentation that you just saw. In terms of execution, things used to be done in silos. We had a little bit of discussion of that earlier, and now we're really looking at how do we bring execution together and make it more integrated, not only in the terms of the strategy, but in the terms of the software programs that we use to make that execution happen. And then finally, in terms of the analysis, historically, it's really been about reporting. How do I keep score? How do I know how many clicks I got or how many sales I made last month or what was the results in a certain geography? And that's really great. It's good to know that, but it's not the same. We can't change the past, right? And so we really we see the change in analysis being about how do I look forward and how do I get information that I can use without making a leap of faith, but it's really data about the future or likelihoods about the future. And then finally, organizational behavior is changing. And I think this also speaks to the silos that were mentioned earlier. Whether it was you within a group sort of winning your share of the budget, or maybe an agency trying to get more for traditional media versus digital media, everybody sort of had their own secret group trying to get the answer. And really now, marketing, I think, is to be optimized, really is moving to more of a collaborative approach. And so I want to talk a little bit about a Think Fine customer and how they've sort of moved through this. This particular customer is a large financial services company in the United States, and they had a campaign. They target people. It's about managing money, and so not surprisingly, they're much more interested in having wealthy people be their customers, and they're also looking for people who are closer to retirement because people go through that life change and they need more help with their finances. So they wanted to acquire those sorts of customers with high lifetime value. They had a very specific objective on the number of people that they wanted to get and the income levels and so forth. And then finally, they wanted to do that in the most optimal way. It wasn't just about bringing in the numbers, but this particular organization has a reputation for being very tight with their spending, and they wanted to be very careful in how they achieve those goals. So they used the Think Fine software, and what they found is that the traditional approach they've had, which was a lot of television ads and a little bit of digital, was really great for having their brand be well known, but it didn't lead to the sorts of conversions that they needed. And so they were ready to take a chance and to make a switch from spending lots of money on television to spending lots of money on digital. And so they really said, wow, this is going to be a big change. How do we do this? How much money do we need? And when you think about going from, say, 80 to 90% of a budget on television to 60 or 70% of a budget on digital, that raises a lot of eyebrows in the corporate suite, right? Folks wonder what's going to happen when all those familiar TV ads during the golf tournament are no longer showing up. And they really wanted to know, well, where's this going to come out? So they used the Think Fine software to do a simulation and to say, using consumer behavior, and we'll go into how that all works later, what's likely to occur as a result of this sort of shift? And we were able to play out scenarios for them. And in the end, the head of marketing was comfortable and confident enough not only to make the switch in the magnitude that we talked about, but also he also made some changes in the content of their marketing campaign. It became a little bit more humorous to appeal more to people at the stage. The good news is after the first year, actually after the first 6 months, they were ahead of their goals, very happy in terms of the results that they got. They were able to go back to the corporate and get more money for the marketing. They overachieved their numbers for the first year, and then now they're in the second year. And what they found out in the second year was all that digital work was really great for conversions, but now they're not getting the brand recognition. That's eroded over time. So the latest, I keep banging those. The latest forecast for them, or the latest scenario they've run, is about making a shift back to spending about 10% of the money that they've been spending in digital back to more TV, putting it behind this new, more humorous campaign, and increasing brand awareness as well. So they're sort of finding the balance as the market changes and as their perception changes. And this is the sort of activity that Think Fine can help you perform. It's really about looking at how marketing mix can change and how it can help you achieve your objectives. So where is marketing mix today in the world? Not just Think Fine, but how does the world see it? Forrester, the industry analyst firm, produced a couple of studies last year. The first one was called A Landscape, and it talked about what people are looking for from marketing mix, and then the second is A Wave, and the Wave talks about the different vendors and how they do versus each other in terms of the dimensions that are important. And so on the left here, you can see what did people want. People wanted to get measurements of the marketing that they were doing today. And they wanted those measurements to include attribution as well as the specifics of how each channel was performing. They wanted to be able to forecast outcomes. So that bit about looking ahead, they wanted to be able to say, what am I likely to get from each new expense that I make? And then finally, they wanted to look across channels. So just as we talked earlier, it's not just about how well does the ad on television do, but how well does the ad on television do in combination with the digital advertising, the mobile phone advertising, et cetera. And then Forrester looked at, well, what do they get from this? When you talk to people who are using marketing mix actively in their business, what are the benefits they state? The first is they can understand what's worked for them in the past, what's working for them today, and what's likely to work for them in the future. Secondly, a benefit was they share business insights across the enterprise. So it's not unusual that the CEO will come across and say, oh, we should have a Facebook page because someone else does, or our competitor has a mobile phone ad, we should have one as well. What they're able to do is to change those discussions and bring quantified information into them. So the second benefit is, here's what's working, here's what's not, let's tell the others, let's have a different sort of discussion, particularly with the finance team. And then finally, they said that the Forrester believed that the marketers were getting the benefits of optimizing their marketing with a relatively low investment. So relative to the spend that people were doing in marketing, typically marketing mix expense is between 1% and 3% of what the total marketing budget is. So we tried to extrapolate from that and use some of the other data that Forrester produced. And we said, what are the real requirements when a business is looking at marketing optimization today? And the first is agility. That's really the ability to respond to the marketplace events, to be able to respond to competitors, to be able to respond when the CFO comes down the hall and says, your budget's cut by 10%, what are you going to do? What are you going to cut out of the marketing? So the first thing that marketing mix needs to be able to do is to be able to move at the cadence the business moves. Secondly, it has to be accurate. There's really not a lot of benefit to pay for a study that doesn't give you good results, that doesn't fit to the mix that you have, both historically and forward-looking. And again, it's really more important that the forecast fit rather than the history. Multidimensional views. It's really not sufficient to just know, oh, I think sales are going to go up 10%. Every marketer is going to want to know, well, how is that doing for each segment, and which technique is working better for that group, and just a whole ability to slice and dice all the information. To have actionable information, I think there was some good discussion about that earlier. I have to have confidence in what I get from the marketing mix supplier, and I have to be able to take that and put it into practice. There's a lot more interest in a collaborative process. So historically, many of you know how it would work. The company would have a plan, the agency would have its part, they'd work separately. Middle of the year, the agency would come back and say, we think you should spend a bit more over here, or whatever. And what's really happening is marketers they often have a fixed budget, and they're really trying to say, well, how do I make that trade-off decision? My digital agency says we should spend more with them. My traditional media agency says we should spend more. My creative agency says I should redo the campaign. And we really need a way to have all those folks working together, working from the same data set, working in the same currency in terms of the results that they're pointed to. It needs to be flexible in the standpoint of markets change, and you need to be able to get results that are up to date. So if you're looking only at historical results, if you're not getting updates on your data, then the reality is that your mix is not likely to stay up to speed. And then finally, low total cost of ownership. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but when you work with a firm that is primarily doing consulting as opposed to software, then you're really going to see that there's a risk, of course, of multiple projects, and that the fees sort of surprising you as you go through the year. So let's talk about the two main types of mix. This is really what the folks from Datalicious asked me to talk about. There's a traditional way of doing it called regression or econometric or deterministic. People use that. That's really about using a wide variety of mathematical tools to fit a line that does a good job of saying, how well can I create an equation that says, based on what's happened in the past, this type of marketing drove that type of result. And so it's really all about getting a lot of good data together, using a lot of statistical techniques, and creating a historical fit to what's happened, and then predicting by extending the curve that you've developed. Agent-based is really a very different sort of thing. That's what ThinkFind does. We're really focusing on consumer behavior as the best predictor of the future. And so that's at a really high level. I'm going to go in a little bit of detail here. I'm not going to go too far. It is on the USB that you've got, so if you want to look at the detail. But at the high level, if you want to tune out for a slide or two, the big difference is a very mathematical approach versus a consumer behavior-focused approach. So as I mentioned, regression is a mathematical approach. It's typically done as a project. So you've got a company or an agency that will come out. They may do all marketing or they may just do media, but it's very dependent. The results you get are very dependent on the expertise of the company and the expertise of the specific analyst that is involved. It's a top-down model or an aggregate model. It's about matching, as we said, the marketing spend to sales. A good analyst and a good user of those techniques will be able to tease out for you what's happened at a segment level or what's happened, for example, by tactic, but it really is sort of a second tier of expertise to be able to do that well. Also, what you'll find is that because of the way regression works for technical reasons, you're going to see a lot about what moved the dial the most. You will get less information back about the new things that you're trying and the new things that you're targeting. Forecasts are an extension of history. We've covered that one already. Forecasts are typically one number. Sometimes they will get into segments if you paid for the models to be built that way. New projects. So when you get new data, if you say this model isn't working very well, for a regression-based approach, you typically have to start again. You get additional data in. It's a new project. There's typically not collaboration capability. I've actually heard that some of the folks in the Australia market have some collaboration capability. That's really good. That's a little bit more advanced than what's going on in some other places. And then finally, in terms of price, it's typically between a 5- and 6-figure price per brand. And then there's an add-on if you want to do additional studies. On the agent-based side, again, that's what ThinkFind does. And agent-based is really different, as it says in the first point here, by company. So it's really more about what's in the software. Because different companies do agent-based in different ways, I'm just going to talk about what ThinkFind does because I think that's a good example, and it makes it easier because I actually know that. I don't have to guess about the competition. But it is different, company by company, what's in the software. ThinkFind also does historical analysis of what you have spent. We do it in a different way. We'll go into exactly what we do later. But we are able to do both online and offline, as was discussed earlier. That's also true of regression. And we also have attribution is built in. So when you see results in a ThinkFind table, you're going to see not just what happened in a silo, but what happened across the board. In terms of the forecasts, what we're really doing is we're doing simulation. And so what you're getting there is not an extension of a historical line, but looking at how consumer behavior is changing and how the marketing plan affects that consumer behavior. ThinkFind works from the individual agent up. Agent-based modeling is each agent is like a person. And so the way that it works, again, we'll go into a little bit more detail, is we get what happens with each person. How do they respond to marketing? How do they buy or not buy the product? And then we aggregate up. So there's lots of opportunity to show some granularity. We do updates of the data as we go. It's part of the subscription as opposed to a new project. And then in terms of price, you see the price is all in a subscription fee. So there's pros and cons to both sides. What we find in the marketplace is that organizations that have particularly large insights teams, they have familiarity with regression, they can work that comfortably. Those are the folks who tend to be most oriented towards sticking with the regression approach. Also tends to be more prevalent in markets that have a heavy dependence on one type of media versus other types, and is also about markets that tend to be slower moving. Where agent-based is more typically adopted is in marketplaces where there's more change happening and where particularly companies are experimenting more with digital and mobile and other sorts of tactics, or where they have lots of segmentation, and segmentation is very important to the marketing organization. I think one of the other parts, and it's mentioned here right at the bottom, is sometimes people are getting regression-based mix as part of a bigger component, and they have a trusted supplier for that, and that's a reason that people might say, I want to do regression mix as part of a bigger, maybe a data package or a consulting package. I think a difference on the other side, the agent-based side, is it is software, and so people may want to be able, the marketers may want to be able to run the scenarios themselves as opposed to waiting to get a response from a consultant. I want to take a moment. Christian talked quite a bit about digital cross-channel attribution, and one of the things that comes up in the marketplace is people go, those seem awfully similar to me. How is it that, do I really need both, and are those things that, I need to both, do I spend money on both of these things? And I think the answer is, if you want, they're very separate, and really the way to think of it is that your marketing mix will tell you, for example, how much should you spend on SEO, whereas your digital cross-channel attribution will tell you how much you should spend on each keyword. How much marketing mix will tell you how much should you spend on display advertising. Digital cross-channel attribution will tell you where to place that. So it's really hand in hand. One's working more across the board, across all your marketing at a strategy level. The other is really focusing on execution within a specific channel. So I wanted to tell another story about a ThinkFine customer. This particular customer, whoops, I've got these in a different order than I remember. So this particular customer is in a consumer services company. They compete in a market with others who have a very similar service. And so from our perspective as consumers, we really would tend to be inclined to look at price. And it's not airlines, but I'll give that as an example. One could say, plane A gets me from here to Melbourne, plane B gets me from here to Melbourne, all I care about is price. This is a similar type business. And what they found is that they had worked so hard to bring down their prices and to be competitive that they had lost brand awareness in the marketplace. So as they cut back marketing, the good news was they were making Wall Street happy. The bad news was people knew about them less and less, and they were sort of creating their own hole to dig out of. What they discovered was that, using the ThinkFine software, was that they discovered they were getting, even though they were winning business, they had a higher and higher hill to climb, and they had to keep discounting deeper and deeper, and they're sort of in a price promotion hole. And they found that one of their competitors, because they were a sponsor of the Olympics, really took a big leap in brand awareness. During that period of time, everybody was seeing the competitors' ads, and they were really falling behind from the brand awareness standpoint. But they also found that they could make a shift in how they were spending, and they could catch up fairly quickly based on the scenarios that they ran. So the CMO went to the board, got approval for a change that was recommended through the ThinkFine scenarios, and they were able to catch up. They actually also exceeded, similar to the other case, they exceeded their first half of the year goals. He was able to get some additional funding, and now they're looking at not only what can we do in terms of media, but can we start to bring our price back up to the levels that they were at before. And so they're playing with a new part of the marketing mix that is, it's not just about media, I guess, it's about pricing for them. So what is agent-based modeling? Now we're going to sort of turn the corner, and we'll give you what the heck is this stuff? How does the watch get built? It's not something that's new. Sometimes people in marketing will go, well, I've never heard of agent-based modeling. It must be a new technique. And it's really not. Agent-based modeling has been around since the 40s. It just hasn't been applied to the marketing arena. It's been applied to other arenas, particularly the hard sciences and the medical field. So you can see the World Health Organization, for example, uses agent-based modeling to look at how things spread viral, how a virus can spread. So the parallel to that is we want to see how your marketing can spread, right? And so it's very good about what agent-based modeling is really good at is taking a very complex system, understanding the rules that make that system work, and translating it. So why didn't people use it in marketing until now? There really were a variety of reasons. Some of them were technical, but the most important was there really wasn't a need for it. The reality is marketing that was primarily TV and print regression worked pretty well for that. When there weren't a lot of options and when the market wasn't changing and the competition wasn't as fierce, regression actually was a pretty good technique for that. And there was a lack of computing power. When you do agent-based modeling, you have a very computing-intensive approach. So we will do, when you run a scenario, you literally will get hundreds of thousands of calculations being run. And so we really needed the computing power to advance to do that. And then finally, the data that was needed. So as more and more data becomes available, it becomes easier and easier to do this type of work. So let's talk about how things work. I was hoping originally that I was going to be able to walk over and point, so I'll have to stay close to the microphones. But the analogy we use for agent-based modeling, if you know the game by Maxis, SimCity, really agent-based modeling by ThinkVine works the same way. We have a population of people that are representative of the country that you're in, both representative in terms of the demographics and also representative in terms of how they consume media and purchase products. And what we're essentially doing is we're taking your marketing activities on the left there, so in this case maybe it's a mobile phone, and we're saying if you do marketing on the mobile phone, which people will respond to that and which people will buy. So just like when you work in SimCity and you make some change, you see what happens out the back end. And so another part of your campaign might be a display ad. You'll reach some different people in a different segment. Some of those people will buy. And then we also look at how things work together. So that's really sort of at a high level what's going on. It's really about how do people, what is your marketing plan? How do people respond? Do people see your advertisements or other marketing? How do they respond to that? And do you buy? So it's about agent-based modeling rather, is really about tying to that final result of sales or new customer acquisitions or whatever the end variable is for you that matters the most. Some of the things you can do with agent-based modeling one example is you can find out what's the right level of budget that you need. So I've already talked about a couple examples where people had very specific goals. They were able to run scenarios and be able to make a case back to the executive team that they could or couldn't meet the objectives that were laid out with the budgets that they had. Second thing you can do is you can compare various plans. You can talk about, do I put a lot of my money in print? Do I put a lot of my money in digital, et cetera? And you can look at each of those with respect to whatever outcome you're trying to achieve. You can get breakdowns for the types of marketing activities you're doing. So here we've just got some examples. Really, in the end, pretty much any type of marketing can be run through the system. Again, it's not just media, but in this case, we've broken out, for example, what's the ROI on your digital, what's the ROI in mass media, what's your ROI on promotion. All of those things include attribution, and you can notice here that not only are we able to give you the historical ROI, but we're also able to project what your ROI will be as you change your mix. You can learn what works best by consumer segment. So you've got all those individual simulated people. We're able to aggregate those up in the way that makes sense to you. If you want to look at older consumers or younger consumers or gender-based or some combination, because you can roll up from the bottom, you can see which marketing tactics worked well with each group, and that can help you become more efficient in the choices you make to target. We also can look at brand value. So one of the questions that comes that we all know as marketers is how much does the advertising I do this year set me up for next year? And this is a very complicated chart, but what you can see is that in 2012, the gray portion represents the base volume or the amount of sales that are going to occur because people know your product and they're just going to come buy it, or it's the result of previous year's advertising. And then the value of that will taper off. If you really stopped all your marketing, you wouldn't have as much from those same consumers, and it would go down again in the following year. But the advertisement and so on that you do in 2012 in the gold there does have effect in 2013, et cetera. So what this chart is showing someone is that as they do different types of work, over time, the brand value, the expectation of what they will receive will grow every year. It also gives you the ability to say, here's the volume I'm going to get from this year's marketing. So when you're doing a marketing plan, and particularly if you're doing things, maybe a campaign that launches in mid-year, you really want to be able to look not only at sort of the arbitrary cutoff at the end of the year, but what's the real value of that campaign over time. Another thing we can do, if you think about the Sims and the way they're interacting with media, whether you have a mobile phone ad or not, some portion of that simulated community is checking their mobile phone, just like some portion is watching TV, just like some portion is on Facebook, etc. And so if you want to try, in a simulated way, some marketing that you haven't done before, you're able to roll that into the simulation, and we'll be able to tell you, in a rough way at least, what would be the value of a mobile campaign for you. We're also able to look at, if you spend just a little bit of money, how much are you likely to get? If you spend a lot of money, how likely are you to get? So that's a real difference between the agent-based approach and the regression-based approach. Regression can only extend forward the things that you've done in the past. So here's how it works. I'm sort of going deeper and deeper into the detail here. Hopefully you're interested enough to stick with it. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to build an agent population. We're going to give those folks the characteristics they need. The second thing we're going to do, and that is about building the side of the equation or the model for how people respond to your marketing. And then the second bit of the equation is adding your data, so we tune the model so it works well for your product and your category. And finally, we're creating market model and shifting into planning. So the first step is, again, imagine sort of the shell agent. We get census data for the country, and we create a set of agents, typically about 50,000 in a run. And those agents represent the company appropriately in terms of demographics. So the right number of men, the right number of women, the right income levels, et cetera. So now you've got that simulated population that looks just like Australia. The second thing we do is we use a variety of sources to get media consumption behavior. So that's where we know how often people check their mobile phones, how much TV they watch, et cetera. And it's really about bringing those two things together so that that population is ready to receive your marketing plan. So as you can see in this diagram, just examples, we've got these 50,000 agents, and they have proclivities to do different things in a proportional way. So for example, people that are older might tend to watch more television or read more print. People that are younger might tend to be on their smartphone. And it's really all worked out through a set of probabilities so that we have individual agents who act like individual people, but in aggregate, we represent the country well. The next thing that happens in an agent-based modeling project is that we get data from the customer. And I think there was a mention earlier of how far back should data go. We typically ask our customers for 2 years of their marketing plans, and we ask for 2 years of their sales data. Now, that's sort of a requirement. We really need that. If you can go back farther, we may use it or we may not. One of the things that I think is maybe not a really great practice that sometimes happens on the regression side is people will ask you for 5 years of data, and we really think that it's questionable in terms of whether that sort of history is really relevant given the way the markets are changing. We can check that, but we really need 2 years of data to work with. The other thing we ask for is we ask for whatever market research customers have. So if you've done a segmentation study or a pricing study or something else, we can build those into the model. The agents can have the characteristics in terms of their purchasing, for example, that fit with what you've learned through your market research. So unlike a world where market research happens, there's a really great study, everybody's excited for a day, and it goes and sits on a shelf. We're able to build the market research into the models, so over time, agents always respond the way your market research says they would respond. Once we have that data that you've provided, we then create a purchasing model. So some customers, based on a variety of variables, will tend to purchase your product more often. So you could imagine, for example, a consumer good. Some people might buy very small portions. Some households might buy in bulk and stock up and so forth. So we're really able to create a model that says for your product and for your category, how do people buy? And then within that, how do they buy versus you and versus your competitors? The actual process that occurs is we train the system by using typically 18 months of that holdout data. And as I said, we fit to history, so we make sure that the model of the agent's behavior gives you the results you actually saw. It's very important that there be a connection made and there not be anything funny and someone's buying many, many, many more Tim Tams than are actually possible to consume or something of that sort. The next thing we want to do is we work against holdout data. So we put data in front of the model that it's never seen before, and we make sure that it forecasts accurately. And we'll work with our customers, and they'll be able to say, yes, that model works on the data it's never seen. We believe that it'll forecast accurately going forward. And then we then move into a stage where the customer can do their own forecasts and make the changes. So how's this all working? Again, it might feel like a sales pitch. I'm really just trying to explain how agent-based modeling works. Typically, what people are doing is they're getting an analysis of their recent activity that's typically presented by the partner. They're getting recommendations of what they should change in their budget done by a marketing staff, and they're getting accurate forecasts about what's going to happen in their business going forward. And that is done typically at the end of a 3 or 4 month period where we've done all the data and we've done all the market tuning, and you get a very traditional presentation, not too dissimilar from what you get in marketing mix, but often with a bit more detail about the segments and the tactics that are important to you. And then you enter an ongoing period where you as the customer are able to go to the software to look at what if I make this change, what will happen, and to see the results out of it. And so we're really looking at a case where you can find out what if I make this change, what will happen, where are the new opportunities? Is there a segment that I don't reach very well, and maybe I should shift my marketing to reach that better? I should talk with my agency and target them, et cetera. And then we give ongoing support in terms of updating the data and making sure that the model is forecasting well. So I don't want to, we didn't have time to do a software demo, but we just want to show you a few screens so you get a sense of what the product looks like. Once the model is set up for you, you can adjust the marketing plans. You can do it at a high level. So the top bit here is, you're making sort of big decisions. I'm going to take $1 million out of this and put it into that, or I want to add 5 million here and see what happens. And so there's a very quick way to do that where you can make that sort of change quite easily. You can also go in very detailed ways. And this particular example is looking at Facebook, Twitter, and TV campaigns at a week-by-week level. So depending on how you want to interact with the software, that's a choice that you get to make. The next thing you look at is the results. So we've gone and we've run this scenario, and all the SIMs have seen your ad or not seen your ad. They've bought or not bought. Then you want to look at results. The example that I've given here in terms of the 3 big bars is the ROI of one plan versus another. So you can compare a scenario from one to another. The next is looking at the long-term plans. So over time, which plan will give you the best benefit, not only the short-term effect, but the long-term effect. And then you can get lots of detail in terms of which tactics are working better, not only at a tactic by tactic level, but a tactic by segment, by geography, et cetera. So there's really the multi-dimensional type of view there. So one last story. Thanks for bearing with me so far. This particular customer is a consumer products company, and they compete in a category that is a kind of a do-it-yourself, an activity that a certain segment of customers do, a certain segment of customers don't do. And what they find is that they were under pressure in terms of the store placements and so forth, and really trying to understand how do I maintain the market share that I've been getting without hurting the margins that I get in the business. And then they also had a general question of, am I doing the right thing? Should I improve overall marketing ROI? And what happened is they had a very specific campaign targeting a group managed by their agency. And that campaign worked really, really well. And they were very excited by that. And so the agency, not surprisingly, came back to them in the middle of the year, and they said, well, what if, this has worked really well. Why don't you spend $5 million more targeting this segment that we've been targeting? And they didn't know how to deal with that. But fortunately, we had just started working with them. And so what they were able to do is they were able to run that scenario, spend $5 million more targeting this segment through the software, and to find out whether that would be likely to change their results or not. And what they found is that they had already penetrated that segment so heavily that the awareness was so high that all that additional expense would bring them very little incremental benefit. So the agency really wasn't happy to hear that, and they basically said, who are these think fine guys? How does this all work? So we worked with the agency. They vetted all the assumptions about how people consume media and so forth. And in the end, they agreed, yes, they had really saturated this marketplace. What they found was that the ads were driving people to the store, but that price was making the decision within the store. So what was happening if they kept spending money was they were going to get less return, and then they were going to lose money once it was in the store because they were actually driving business for their competitors who weren't spending money on advertising, they were just cutting price. So long story short, that analysis was also able to determine that there was another group that was underserved. And so they took the $5 million and put it elsewhere and upped their results. And so again, that's sort of an example of how working with agent-based modeling, because it's based on the behavior of consumers, because it comes from the bottom up, you really can look at how do I allocate my marketing budget? How do I target the segments that I want to achieve results for? And how do I bring it up piece by piece to get a multidimensional view of what is most effective and what is most efficient for me as a marketer?